She stood in the middle of a toy store. Walls of colour on every side, flashing lights, sounds, promises printed on boxes. Her daughter was turning 4 in 2 days, and she wanted, more than anything, to get it right. She picked up a box, put it down, picked up another, and somewhere in that aisle, surrounded by everything designed to make a child happy, she felt something she didn't expect. Doubt, not about the toy, about something larger, something she couldn't quite name. She bought 3 things, drove home, wrapped them carefully, and that feeling stayed with her. We live in the most toy-saturated era in human history. More options, more colours, more sounds, more interactivity, more everything. And yet, if you spend time around young children today, you notice something quietly troubling. Not in every child, but in many. A restlessness that doesn't settle. An attention that flickers and moves on before anything has really begun. A boredom that arrives almost instantly, even when surrounded by things. Especially when surrounded by things. And parents feel it too. That strange exhaustion of constantly trying to fill a space that won't stay filled. But almost nobody stops to ask the real question. What if the filling is the problem? Think about what childhood looked like 60 years ago. Empty fields, long summer afternoons with no plan, a back porch and a vague instruction to go outside and come back when it got dark. No agenda, no enrichment schedule, no device to hand over when the car ride got long. Just time. Open, unstructured, slightly uncomfortable time. And now, a child in a restaurant reaches across the table before the food arrives and a screen appears. Silence preserved. Problem solved. A 4-year-old unwraps a toy on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Thursday, it's at the bottom of a pile. More stimulation is found. The pile grows. A child in the back seat says, "I'm bored," 8 minutes into a 40-minute drive, and a parent, exhausted, well-meaning, loving, immediately begins searching for a solution. Because in modern parenting, silence has quietly been reclassified as a problem, and boredom has become something close to failure. But here's what that shift is costing us. Quietly, invisibly, over years. To understand what's happening, we need to go somewhere unexpected. We need to go backward. Picture a child in a backyard sometime in the middle of the last century. There are no toys nearby, no screens, no activities planned. It's a Tuesday afternoon and there is nothing to do. At first, the child is simply present. Then something stirs. A stick on the ground becomes interesting. Then it becomes a sword. Then it becomes a bridge for ants. Then the ants become an army, and the stick becomes the only thing standing between safety and chaos. And the child has disappeared entirely into a world that exists nowhere, except inside their own mind. Nobody gave them that world, they built it. And what was being built wasn't just a game, it was the architecture of a self. Between birth and age 5, the human brain forms more than 1 million neural connections every single second. Sit with that number for a moment. 1 million per second. And those connections, the architecture that will shape how this child thinks, feels, creates, regulates, relates, and eventually becomes, are not built through instruction, not through stimulation, not through the right toy at the right time. They are built through something almost radically simple. Freedom. Freedom to explore without an outcome. To play without a script, to fail without consequence, to be uncertain and sit in that uncertainty long enough to find a way through. This is what the developing brain is hungry for. Not entertainment, not answers, open questions, open space, open time. But here's what almost no one says out loud. Modern parenting makes silence feel irresponsible. When a child is quiet and still and doing nothing, something in us grows uneasy. Are they learning enough? Are we doing enough? Shouldn't something be happening? So we fill it, not out of neglect, out of love. And that is the invisible tragedy at the center of this. We are overstimulating our children not because we don't care about them, We are doing it because we care so much that we cannot bear to let them struggle. And the struggling, that quiet, unglamorous, uncomfortable sitting with nothing, is exactly where the growing happens. There's a moment that happens in many households, and it passes so quickly that most parents never notice it. A child, maybe 2, maybe 3, sits with a few blocks on the floor, and for a few minutes they are completely absorbed, building something, knocking it down, building something different. Then they look up, and in that look is a kind of invitation. Not for attention necessarily, just acknowledgement. I'm here. You're there. We exist together in this moment. The parent looks up from their phone, smiles, goes back. The child waits a breath longer than feels comfortable. And then, if nobody comes, one of 2 things happens. In some children, they return to the blocks, reinforced in the quiet belief that their inner world is worth returning to, that they are capable of sustaining their own attention, that what's inside is enough. In others, something shifts. The blocks lose their interest. The child begins to fuss, reaches for the parent's attention more insistently, and the parent, exhausted, loving, reaches for a toy, something bright and loud and immediately engaging. The fussing stops, problem solved. But what was actually learned in that moment? That discomfort leads to rescue, that the inner world isn't enough, that something outside must come and fill the feeling. Nothing visible broke, but something invisible was being practiced, again and again and again. Children who are never bored rarely discover themselves. Think about the children who grew up with almost nothing, not because their families were cruel, but because there simply wasn't much. A few worn-down objects, open fields, time that sprawled without agenda. Many of those children grew into adults with something remarkable. Not wealth, not credentials, resourcefulness. A particular kind of confidence that comes not from being told you're capable, but from discovering it, alone, quietly, on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, with nothing but a stick and an imagination that had never been told it wasn't enough. That confidence isn't taught. It's built. In the gap between boredom and invention. In the small, painful moment when a child wants something to do and nothing appears, and so they reach inward and find that something is there. That reaching inward, that is the thing. And every time we fill the gap before the reaching happens, every time we arrive with stimulation before the child discovers their own, we shorten the distance they have to travel. We mean well, but we shorten it, and over years, the distance gets shorter and shorter. Until one day, the child sits somewhere and the gap opens, and they reach inward, and the silence is unfamiliar, almost frightening. A child who was never taught to be alone with themselves becomes an adult who cannot be. And the inability to create almost always begins as the inability to tolerate silence. 20 years later, a young adult sits at a desk, a blank document on the screen in front of them, a work assignment, a creative problem, something that requires generating something from nothing. And they feel it, that hollow, uncomfortable, slightly panicked feeling of not knowing where to begin, of waiting for something external to arrive and show them the way. They open a new tab, check their phone, make a coffee, come back. Still blank. They are not lazy. They are not incapable. They are not the wrong person for this moment. They are simply, without realizing why, waiting to receive a world that they were never taught to build. And somewhere beneath the frustration and self-criticism, there is a feeling so old they can't name it. The feeling of reaching inward and finding the space a little too quiet. A child who never had to create their own world may never fully trust their inner one. What children need, more than any toy ever made, is almost embarrassingly simple. Space, not a designed playroom, not curated materials on a shelf, just room where something might happen, where nothing is planned, where the child is the most interesting thing present. Time, unscheduled, unoptimized, slightly uncomfortable time. Time that doesn't know what it's for yet. Time that might, at first, feel like nothing. And boredom. Not boredom as failure. Not boredom as a problem to solve. Boredom as doorway. Because boredom is not the enemy of imagination. It is the condition that makes imagination necessary. When a child says, "I'm bored," and a parent resists the reflex to immediately solve it, something remarkable becomes possible. The child turns inward and discovers something has been there all along. Not the right activity at the right time. Just a calm adult nearby who is not afraid of the quiet. The developing nervous system of a young child is not yet capable of regulating itself. It borrows regulation from the adults around it. It reads the emotional temperature of the room. It orients itself by the steadiness of the people it loves. A parent who sits on the floor nearby, doing nothing in particular, occasionally looking up and smiling, is doing something neurologically profound. They are teaching the child's body what safe feels like. And a child who knows what safe feels like in their body can go much further from safety than one who doesn't. That sounds like a paradox. It isn't. Security is not a cage. It is a launching pad. The child who feels deeply safe in your presence is the one who wanders furthest from you, who tries things, who recovers from failure without collapsing, who eventually, decades later, is capable of sitting alone with a blank page and feeling curious rather than afraid. It begins here, on the floor, in the quiet, with you nearby and nowhere else to be. And what about the objects themselves? The boxes that get played with longer than the toys inside them. The wooden spoon that becomes a microphone, then a wand, then a paddle for a boat that exists only in the middle of the living room. These things are not accidents. They are something essential being revealed. Open-ended objects, things with no instructions, no right answer, no built-in story, force the brain to generate, to project meaning onto something neutral, to invent. And every time a child invents, every time they decide this scarf becomes a river, and this pillow becomes a mountain, and this afternoon becomes an adventure that nobody planned, something is being practiced. Not just play, identity. The slow, private accumulation of a self that trusts its own imagination. That knows it can make something from nothing. That has done it before. That believes, without needing to be told, that what's inside is worth something. This is what we are really talking about. Not toys versus no toys, not screens versus nature. The question underneath all of it is simpler and so much more important. What does this child believe about their own inner world? Do they trust it? Do they return to it? When life goes quiet, and life will go quiet many times in many forms, do they know how to go inward and find something there? Or have they learned slowly, without anyone meaning to teach them, to wait for someone else to fill it? Back to the toy store, back to that mother in the aisle with the doubt she couldn't name. That feeling wasn't guilt about the toys. It was something closer to instinct. A quiet knowing, beneath the noise and the colour and the promises on the boxes, that what her daughter needed most could not be found here. Not because this place was wrong, because what she was really looking for doesn't come in a package. It comes in an afternoon that has no plan, a corner of the floor, and permission to make a mess. A parent sitting nearby who isn't in a hurry. A boredom that's allowed to breathe long enough to become something else entirely. It comes in the accumulation of 1,000 small moments where a child reaches inward and finds that what's there is real and strange and enough and theirs. That is what shapes a human being, not the toy. The space around it, not the gift. The freedom to discover they don't need one. She drove home, wrapped the 3 things carefully. Her daughter loved them. For about 20 minutes, Then she pushed them aside and spent the rest of the afternoon building a city out of cushions and cardboard boxes, narrating the whole thing to herself in a voice that sounded ancient and certain and completely free. And her mother, watching from the doorway, felt it again. That feeling. Only this time, she recognized it. Relief. The quiet, unexpected relief of watching a child discover something no store could sell her. That she was enough, that she had always been enough, that everything she needed to build a world, she already carried inside.